extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is AVFS. I'd like to welcome you in if you're driving around town right now listening to AM 640. I welcome you in. Or if you're listening at work via the AM 640 app, picking up the show that way, I welcome you in too. Or if you're listening to me right on Shaw Direct on channel 865, I welcome you in. Or if you're listening to me on your 3 or 4G personal communication device via the Stream the World software, and now available free on Apple Music or the Radio Player Canada app, I welcome you in. Or maybe you're what some call the best seat in the house, bar none, to check out A View from Space. Logged on to 640toronto.com, picking up live audio streaming there. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. Surprised? Another terrorist attack in France? It comes just 3 days, the perfect number, before the French go to the polls to elect a new president. Surprise! Another terrorist attack. Are you really surprised? No. Even I said before the spring equinox, if you'll recall, downtime right now. Wait till after the equinox, all hell will break loose. And it has. If you do the research, you'll find that over the centuries, it's been France that has always been used by the elite to manipulate Europe to suit their New World Order plans. A plan transformed the world into a global government. Essentially one world government under one leader. France has been used over and over throughout history to change all of Europe, both politically and geographically. Need proof? Okay, here's proof. Here's the number count of bombings, stabbings, shootings and stabbings, beheadings, vehicle rammings, and letter bombs of what officially have been deemed French terrorist attacks since the 19th century started in the country of France. In the 19th century, there were 7 official terrorist attacks. In the 20th century, there were 64. In this, the 21st century, 7 years in, and then another 7 years in, making it, well, let's call it 17 years, there have been 21. 19 of those 21 in the 21st century so far have happened in just the past 2 years. 19 since 2015. There have been a total of 21 in all. But this latest attack on Thursday, now called the Champs-Élysées attack, the number has risen to 22, a double 11. The number of destruction in numerology. The Champs-Élysées attack, this latest molding event designed to transform Europe, began this past Thursday evening as all of France began settling in front of their television sets, getting ready to watch the final presidential debate on TV. As I've just said, it was the last debate before the election, and all 11 candidates running. There's the 11 again, yes. Were gathered together on stage. It barely gets underway. And all of a sudden, breaking news breaks across the screen, interrupts the debate program with news and video of yet another terrorist attack in Paris. Again, as with other attacks in France, it takes place in one of the most iconic landmark locations that's so familiar to the entire world. The City of Light. Because the Illuminati are enlightening us all. You know, the gunmen, the police, on the most iconic landmark location, the Champs-Élysées. This is the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640. This is AVFS, and I'm just getting started. Got to call Space on Talk Radio AM 640. Communicate by email only. It's the only way. Space640toronto.com or Spaceman at 640toronto.com are the two addresses, and thank you so much. They start coming in before the show even gets started. A lot of people are coming to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 now for their hard news. Can't take the Illuminati-controlled mass media lies any longer. So a gunman this past Thursday gets out of his vehicle after parking it near a couple of police cars in the Champs-Élysées, the most iconic area in all of the world, really. Opens fire on the policeman. One dies, two others wounded. The one policeman who does die, by the way, Xavier Huguel, is also one of the men that was deployed at the scene back in 2015 during the Bataclan attack, and even attended the Sting concert that reopened that venue last year. As a matter of fact, he came back from the dead today on BBC because they actually interviewed this policeman at the Bataclan concert when Sting was playing to reopen it. And he spoke about how they have to stand up to this evil. Huguel, who was shot in the head, was an active member of the association that represents lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender police officers. A very, 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 what should I say, all-encompassing blood sacrifice. The Avenue Champs-Élysées is an avenue in the 8th arrondissement of Paris. 8, of course, being the sun worshippers number. It's known for its great theaters, its incredible cafes, and its luxury shops and luxury hotels. The Champs-Élysées actually takes its name from the French translation for the Elysian fields in Greek mythology. The Elysian fields in Greek mythology originally was the paradise for dead heroes in ancient Greece. As I've already stated, is mentioned throughout all Greek mythology. The Elysian fields, hallowed territory, and a fitting place for our all-encompassing police officer who was the blood sacrifice for this last terrorist attack, I'm sure, before this presidential election coming up in a few hours from right now as I speak to you. The Elysian fields gave the name to the Champs-Élysées in France. It's one of the most famous streets in the world, and that is why. And what's more, It's the reason this highly esteemed piece of real estate is what the French proudly call their world-famous boulevard, la plus belle avenue du monde. The world's most beautiful avenue. Why? Because it symbols the burial ground. The symbolization of this paradise in Greek mythology for all dead heroes. That's why they brought him back to life on the BBC. He spoke after the grave. Well, through video. You can now add one more hero buried in the paradise ground of what is comparable to the Elysian fields in Greek mythology, Xavier Huguet, the police officer. Yet another blood sacrifice offered to ensure the success of the ages-old plan to further the Illuminati's goal of one world government, one leader, and one currency. And here we go again, as usual. The gunman who's blamed, who carried out the attack, how many times have you heard me say this, was well known to police. His name, Karim Shafi, a French national. Here comes your hidden 13. There's 3 of them. He's 39 years old. 3 times 13 is 39. 3, the most powerful magnification in all of witchcraft to make a spell have its most potent effect. This French national, Karim Shafi, did just that on Thursday. 39 years old. Yes, a hidden 13, the number of the cult, marking the event as usual. There's another blatantly hidden, in plain sight, 13 that marks this event too. That makes it a double 13 event. I'll inform you of that in moments ahead here on ABFS and Talk Radio AM 640. Now, getting back to this shooter, this patsy, Karim Shafi. He's had quite a long history. Wait for it. On just what he was programmed to do this week in Paris. Wait for it. That is targeting police. He had been building up to doing this long before Thursday's past attack. Shafi opens fire on a group of cops at the corner of Champs-Élysées and King George V Avenue with an AK-47, so says one eyewitness, killing Officer Huguet. A note praising ISIS conveniently listing security sites falls out of his jacket pocket as police pursue and shoot him, we're told. Can you believe that? A note just conveniently falls out of his pocket, connecting him to ISIS. It's like Muhammad Atta's driver's license, if you recall, in 2001, that was conveniently found in the rubble of the collapsed, burning World Trade Center towers. A little piece of paper actually survives an inferno that actually swallows an entire aircraft with nothing left. All burned is found at the scene. A small little piece of paper, a driver's license. And the same thing happens with Shafi. A note accidentally falls from his pocket. The Illuminati never do anything new. They just simply repeat history. Oh, and this wasn't the first run-in with this already known to police Karim Shafi. He'd done multiple stints in jail over the last 15 years for attempted murder, robbery, other violent related charges. In fact, he was previously convicted for trying to kill police officers in 2001. and for that was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He's supposed to be out in 2021, isn't he? Well, no, he got out early. In prison, he was said to have even shot and injured a prison guard after grabbing his gun. But he wins an appeal 4 years later and is released in 2013. Get it? In time for more programming. But he's back behind bars in 2014 for robbery, and this is when the programming begins immensely heavily, and sentenced to 4 more years. Then again paroled in 2015. Remember me saying to you, because I repeat it often on AVFS, on Talk Radio AM 640, because it always happens, because it often happens. If a so-called terrorist has been either in the military custody or in prison custody for some time, some period of time, in other words, under the control of authorities, they can easily be programmed by the psychiatrists working for these elites, like a factory even, turning out these programmed patsies to perform these terrorist events and move the agenda along. How often have you heard problems mentally? So we know this latest attacker had been in the control of authorities quite often, and in fact, yesterday, Karim Shafi's former lawyer, Jean-Laurent Panier, said that Shafi was an extremely isolated person who needed psychological help and never got it. I beg to differ. Many times, I've discovered that there were others involved in these attacks too, is because these psychiatrists cannot be sure that their programmed assassin will do exactly as told. What I mean by that is just this. In many of these terrorist attacks, at the very beginning, as it's getting underway, with all the shock and confusion that surrounds it, there's always stories, rumors, of possibly not just one, but possibly 2 or even more shooters. In every single case, at the very beginning. But in the end, it's only one, usually, who ends up being blamed as the perpetrator, and they go, it was a lone person attack, a lone wolf. So this latest attack was no different. Because, as I've said, they don't do anything new. First reports stated earlier on that there was 1, possibly 2, shooters involved in this Champs-Élysées attack. The shooting actually took place not on the Champs-Élysées at all, but in fact, on King George Avenue. It happened right in front of the King George V Hotel, which is owned, by the way, by the Saudi royal family. Just mentioning well-known sponsors of terrorism occasionally, we're told. The King George V Hotel address is 31 King George Avenue, a backward 13, a hidden 13. The one I told you was blatantly hidden in plain sight. King George V himself, by the way, is Queen Elizabeth II's grandfather. George V became the first monarch of the House of Windsor. He renamed that family, the Windsors, after his favorite castle, from the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which is the real name, because of anti-German public sentiment at the time, because just 3 years after he dies, Great Britain goes to war with Germany in 1939 to fight the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha's cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany. That's the Second World War. First World War, I'm sorry. Now, it was known to be one of those wars to end all wars. So 2 13s, a double 13 is inlaid into this terror event in Paris this week. The perpetrator was 39 years old. That makes us a triple 13. And it happened right outside the prestigious King George V Hotel with the street address number 31, the backward 13. And the number 5 as well for King George V. The number of death for the unwashed and uninitiated, and the number of fortress for the elites. How fitting, isn't it, in this latest French attack 3 days before their election for their presidency. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. There's more next. I'm the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com is the only way I communicate with you other than this microphone. Thanks for the one that you've sent. So I was saying before the break, this Paris attack, this attack in Paris, officially a terrorist attack number 93 and counting in French history since the 19th century started. That's when I started counting. Has a man who's been well known for years, even had a history of always wanting to kill a policeman, being released by authorities onto the streets just this past February. It is now getting to the end of April. He's just been out over 40 to 50 days. That's all. Programmed to do just this. All this going down with the country of France in a state of emergency being in place for going on 2 years now. You have a self-professed wannabe cop killer that is able to somehow purchase weapons under a state of emergency. Had an automatic shotgun in his car, as well as some knives, we're told, in the car that he was driving, as well as the AK-47 he used on King George V Avenue to shoot the police. So the glaring question is, how could a man ever do all of this, just released in February, managed to get all of these weapons, and without being red flagged, caught? How could he ever get away with it right under the noses of the authorities? Martial law. Freely driving around town, car loaded with weapons, and then pulls up to a group of police and starts shooting. How can a felon come into possession of high-caliber weapons and freely wheel about town and kill cops, which he's even professed many times that he's wanted to do? Yet, he's released from custody because there's no proof. They had him in their custody and then released him in February. Yet there's now over 50,000 soldiers and police patrolling all areas in France. The French are now used to seeing heavily armed soldiers in body armor walking on the streets. No, it just sounds too bizarre to be true that a guy could get away with that kind of act, with that kind of surveillance, yet this scenario of someone being known to police still gets away with executing the attack as it happens over and over and over now, doesn't it? Doesn't make sense, does it? It just doesn't make sense unless this is being allowed to occur. Personally, I believe that nothing just ever happens. It's made to happen. The reason France has seen over the history 93 now terror attacks, 93, that France is always the country used by the elites to change, to transform all of Europe. Ypres is in France. So many big things have happened in combat with France. Yep. This has never changed, and it won't change until the elites implement the New World Order. It won't change until that global government is established. The globalists are going to see that it happens. In order to convince us all that there must be a change in an attitude of our way of life. That's what's being underway for a long, long time now, and it's now speeding up mightily toward the final conflict, the third and final world war. Everything is changing, and everything is speeding up. The way we view sex, the way we view gender, the way we view life, the way we view everything is changing. Freedom. There's a lot less of it now. As far as the transformation of Europe, France is to play a major role. The number 11 means destruction, as in our old system. There were 11 candidates on the stage running for the presidency of France, and the whole country watching, with this latest terror attack occurring as it gets underway. While the country has been in a state of emergency for a couple of years, which has new beefed-up emergency laws. And this guy still got away with it. Those laws included expanded powers to immediately place under house arrest any person if there are reasons to think their behavior is a threat to society, security, or public order. They get more scope to dissolve groups or associations that participate in, facilitate, or incite acts that are a threat to public order. Suspected members of these groups can be placed under house arrest. No charge. No limit on how long you can hold the guy for or the woman for without charge. It also extends the ability to carry out searches without warrants and to copy data from a system found on any or even all computers. MPs, lawyers, magistrates, journalists will be the only ones exempt. The elite. The new laws will give new powers to block websites that encourage terrorism, essentially controlling the internet in France. Yet another attack happened with all of those new powers. Funny thing, isn't it? Originally, the state of emergency now in place was declared following the November 20th Paris attacks, which is due to expire after this presidential election is held, April 23rd, 2017, and then the runoff, May 7th. It's had 4 extensions. This state of emergency. Yes, you heard me correctly. I said 4 extensions. But it looks now as though there'll likely yet another extension coming, bringing the number of extensions to 5. The election coming, just within a few hours now. Some of that information when I come back on Talk Radio AM 640. It's Spaceman. This is ABFS. I'm the guy to call space. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Got a critique of tonight's show? Got some information I'd like to pass along? Or you just want to say where in the world you're listening to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 from? Space at 640toronto.com or Spaceman at 640toronto.com. Thanks for yours, the one you sent. So with the election coming up in France in just a few hours from now, it's got Marine Le Pen at the lead in the polls, who is the French version of Donald Trump. Or, if you like, the French version of possible another Brexit. France-Sexit. So you can see the importance of a feigned or fake terrorist attack to push the people, and the role that it could play to move the people's opinion as to why they call France their home and want to keep it their home. Your choice would be Marine Le Pen. In France, there's always been an attitude of allowing people to be totally free, do whatever they want. Nobody will ever say anything about it. It used to be that way in France. Why do you think it attracted so many artists throughout the centuries to flock there? It was about the freedom, the joie de vivre, the love of life, of everyone and anyone can do whatever they like. It may not be right for me, but you're more than welcome to do anything you would like. The French citizens are learning. And when I say learning, I should actually say being socially engineered through a shock and awe, a kind of experience to begin to fear, to take away the joie de vivre, to change the way the French see themselves today in the 21st century. The French are the hardest to change the attitude. In the rest of Europe, it's easy. They're used to tyranny. They're used to police-type states. But the French, it's always been free and do what you please. The French are finally going to let go of their old way. They're almost ready to give up that past way of life and accept the new. Even though tonight, as I speak to you, the attitude of French citizens has changed. There's a lot more pessimism, a lot more trepidation as to what the future will bring France and its role that it's to play in the future as a country. And this has been carefully orchestrated by the Illuminati to force this to come about. Now, bring on the French presidential election getting underway just hours from now. A new leader will be elected. The French election process works this way. After Sunday's vote, the two winner candidates will go on to the polls one more time, which is in May 7th. The French presidential election 2017, this one is billed as the most unpredictable in all of history. The Illuminati-controlled mass media states that Marine Le Pen is the favorite to win the first round of the voting, who has vowed to freeze immigration, to end the Schengen Agreement, which is basically being able to move from country to country without a passport, no border checks, in the European Union member countries. In fact, the police service are heavily in support of this woman, Marine Le Pen, who wants to freeze immigration and end the Schengen Agreement. Of course, they would want to do that. The trouble would stop. Marine Le Pen, who's seen as the toughest candidate on security, has a close rival, his name Emmanuel Macron. He's being tipped to become the next French president, as a matter of fact, by the Illuminati-controlled mass media. But as you're very aware now, there's this doubt now that's arisen as to how close the real truth is and what the Illuminati-controlled mass media say and what the polls are. As shown in the Brexit vote, glaringly, and was also shown in the U.S. presidential election, too, with Trump the winner. Now, we're going to be shown once again that it could possibly be wrong again in the French election, because they're calling the eventual winner of the presidential election to be Emmanuel Macron. What's more, he's a male. A man. What does that have to do with it? Well, after the spring equinox, according to the religion of the Illuminati, and they follow it very closely, they are chained to it. After the spring equinox, the woman rules the planet for 6 months. The man takes over after the fall equinox. And it just so happens that there is a dark horse in this French presidential race, and it's a woman, Marine Le Pen. I'm wondering if it's going to play out again, just as it did with Donald Trump. Trump, elected just after the fall equinox, where the man rules. It's going to be very interesting to see if the Illuminati break away from that in the French presidential election. I have my doubts. I've said it before, about 3-4 months ago, that Le Pen would likely win and become the new French president, to become the disruptor president in Europe, just as Trump has been in North America. By the way, this latest attack in Paris, the Champs-Élysées attack, came on a very auspicious date, last Thursday. A date the Illuminati revere. And no, I'm not talking about 420, the marijuana day. April 20th is Hitler's birthday. Little do people know who are into marijuana and smoke it on that day, because it's the ritual, are in fact celebrating Adolf Hitler's birthday, unbeknownst to them. And the elites are laughing at them all. We've got them celebrating one of our heroes' birthdays, and they don't even know it. Adolf Hitler thought that he had been chosen by the Illuminati, destined to be the Antichrist, the leader of this new world order I talk about. His plan was to first take Europe and form out of it what was once the old Roman Empire. The same group of countries that made up the old Roman Empire is the European Union today. And then expand that old Roman Empire to a global concept, a one-world government with Adolf Hitler as its leader. As a matter of fact, the old Roman Empire, the European Union was created by the Treaty of Rome. That's the legal document's title. Hitler was told all of this, that he would be the leader, and what he must do to make all of this happen for the elites. More on this deeper into tonight's show when I cover the Tula Society on AVFS on Talk Radio, AM 640. Now, the description of of the coming Antichrist, who will soon reign, is a king of fierce countenance who understands dark sentences. His power will be mighty, but it won't be with his own power that he will destroy and prosper. It will be a satanic force through his body, through the policy that it creates, and also he will cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he will magnify himself in his heart by peace and destroy many. When I say a king of fierce countenance who understands dark sentences is that he understands black magic concepts. Dark meaning the occult world. Dark sentences are actually knowing what to do and how to manipulate the masses through black magic. A king of fierce countenance is one very good way to describe Adolf Hitler. Make no mistake about the fact that Hitler was a practicing witch, and most of his outdoor spectacles involved active witchcraft. His countenance, severe. And that was a huge part of his whole popularity. Understanding dark sentences, as I say, literally means in the original language dark trickery and craftiness. And the words he will cause craft to prosper in his hand clearly refers to witchcraft. Witchcraft is called the craft. Witches take great time and effort to understand the perfect and dark sayings and rituals that they have to know in order to become a practiced witch, to carry out spells and hexes and have the power. And as far as the word craft goes, it means witchcraft, all right. All you have to do is confirm by going to any New Age or satanic bookstore, browse their books. They constantly refer to their witchcraft as the craft. The Antichrist that's to come will be someone who is a practiced adept in the art of witchcraft. Spaceman, Talk Radio, AM 640. There is more right after this break. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Let me call him SH. Greetings from Taiwan, Space. I was recently introduced to your show just in time for Ishtar. I was blown away. It's not the first time I've heard this stuff, but it confirms what I already heard. World events make more sense when viewed from space. I got interested in the esoteric mainly after friends had seen reptilian beings in Jakarta, Indonesia, they said. Just to let you know, I'm listening to you in Taiwan. You do a great job and are well researched. I was telling a friend about the occult connection to the Easter holiday, and he freaked out. It was too much. There is something to be said for positive thinking. There is something to be said to be sticking our head into the sand, too. And, oh, by the way, you got a pleasant voice. SH, Taiwan. Well, around the world, they check this show out now, you know. Germany. I've had emails from South America. Australia are regular. But Taiwan, the first time I've had an Oriental-based email. And I thank you so much for it. I was speaking about Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler's birthday, last Thursday, April 20th, was the date of the Champs-Élysées terrorist attack in France. That is probably staged simply because they are going to sway the election with it and say, well, it's because of this. And Marine Le Pen, the woman, will reign as the president. A woman after the spring equinox? To me, and my knowledge of the past, it fits. We shall see. The Antichrist, when he comes, as Adolf Hitler thought he was, will practice a religion that's not based upon the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. The Antichrist will also be sexually perverted. He will honor the God of forces, all occultists, including Masons, Illuminists, Satanists, white magicians, black magicians, teach that God is a force. The movie that popularized this satanic concept is Star Wars, where black magic duels white magic. And both were using the Force to try to win the war. The phrase, "May the Force be with you," was on everybody's lips after that flick first was shown. This is classic witchcraft. And yet most people don't know it. What Revelation says, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. 1 is, the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue for a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. The Illuminati are going to follow the King James Version of the Bible and Revelation to the letter. You know the 7 mystery kings, don't you? What is a mystery king? He's a unique leader in 2 ways. Politically, he's an absolute dictator. There's nothing new. History's full of those guys. Second, spiritually, he's an ordained satanic high priest, a black magician, and fills the unique role of daily ruling his nation according to the precepts of Satanism. When you put these 2 aspects together, you get a very short list of rulers who have ruled in that exact way. When the book of Revelation was being written, the world was under the heel of the 6th mystery king, Nero of Rome. He's and 1 is. Before Nero, the world had 5 mystery kings, going back to Nimrod of Babylon. But after Nero of Rome, no one has ruled who's fulfilled this unique role of mystery king until Adolf Hitler. Hitler was both the absolute dictator and the satanic high priest for the entire nation of Germany. Alice Bailey, who wrote in a book called The Externalization of the Hierarchy, that the Great One, this Antichrist, whom they call the New Age Christ, will restore the ancient mysteries to outer expression. What Bailey meant was that he, this one coming, would restore the ancient satanic worship to public practice. This is exactly what Hitler did. And I've told you many times that the elite are sick of practicing their religion and tricking you to celebrate their high witching holidays through other excuses for doing it. They want to do it out in the open now. They want to drop all of the trickery. They just want you to outright obey and worship their God. Anyone who knows about Satanism will tell you that this huge public spectacle that Hitler had many times with huge crowds were simply huge public satanic ceremonies with Hitler as the high priest. He would stand in a specially built place in Berlin and give these orations, work his audience up to a frenzy by telling them wonderful things on what Germany would become, and then when they were at the tumultuous point, he would turn his back on them, fold his arms, and look the other way. And they would just go absolutely higher and crazier. I tell you, it was some incredible footage to watch Hitler in an orative action in those days, and the spell that he cast upon the hundreds of thousands. It's the Spaceman, Talk Radio, AM 640. Back with more right after this break. It's a view from space. That's all it is. Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the Spaceman. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. So I've been tearing apart, well, actually deciphering one of the paragraphs in Revelation, in King James Version of the Bible. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, so let's forget about those 5. One is, which was Nero of Rome, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. That will be number 7. So Hitler was history's 7th mystery king. He ruled for the short space, just 12 years. Let me go back to Revelation again now, because the Illuminati are going to follow Revelation to the word, to the letter. 5 are fallen, forget about 5 of them. 1 was Nero of Rome. The other, when it was written, had not come yet. He had to continue a short space, so the words are written in Revelation. That was Adolf Hitler. 12 years he ruled. And the beast that was and is not, even though he is the 8th and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. Now, so Hitler's history's 7th mystery king. He ruled for just 12 years. Now, the coming Antichrist will be history's 8th mystery king. The final mystery king. 8 is the sun worshipper's number. And he will be of the 7. What's that mean? Well, in other words, he'll be just like the other 7 mystery kings that have ruled before him. So there's a little tip for you. The coming Antichrist, when he shows his true colors after the likableness, lovableness, the wonderfulness of his promises, will be just like Adolf Hitler. He will be of the 7. He'll be just like the other 7. So if you wanted to know what the coming Antichrist will eventually be like, just study the Satanism of Hitler, because he'll be just like him. Stay with me for some eye-opening truth. Remember that this kingdom of the Antichrist that's coming, as terrible as it will be immediately preceded by a period of peace and safety. And what will look like an end to all war and suffering. But all the people of the world will be mightily deceived. You know, right after World War II ended, stories began to appear about Adolf Hitler's involvement in the occult, the deep, dark, black magic witchcraft. But just as suddenly as they appeared, they disappeared. These stories. Historians and politicians would not openly admit this satanic side of Adolf Hitler and Nazism. Today, nobody ever even brings it up. I'm the only one that talks about that world, that spirit world, that hidden truth. Hitler got into the New Age works of Madame Blavatsky, the head of the House of Theosophy. Her ideas are the keys for the leaders of the New World Order. Blavatsky, writing through Tibetan masters, wrote books like Isis Revealed. Another one, Secret Doctrine. Hitler's early occult training was the same New Age and New World Order teachings that are so popular today. Also, like a lot of news about New Age people are today, Hitler was consumed by the stories of the Holy Grail, consumed by stories of this thing known as the Spear of Destiny. Hitler was also deeply involved in achieving transcendent consciousness through meditations and drugs that are so critical to opening the third eye of Eastern mysticism. Hitler was also heavy into the Akashic record and reincarnation. He also deeply immersed himself in stories of pan-Germanic mysticism, old Nordic legends of the same ones that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote about, and have now been made into movies. The Lord of the Rings trilogy. He's playing it back to you, programming you. He's also was involved with people involved in a blood brotherhood who participated in black magic rituals involving sexual perversions. It prepared him for the ultimate experience of them all, joining the Satanic Brotherhood of Death Society, the Tula Society, in 1919. The master at that time was Dietrich Eckhart, who had a deep influence over Hitler. These were the people, the Tula Society, that told Hitler he was to be the coming Antichrist, and that they would teach all he needs to know how to achieve the goal of global supremacy. So Dietrich Eckhart had a deep influence over Adolf Hitler. It was also at this time that Hitler became mesmerized by the person, the power, the office of this Antichrist. He also, around this time, that Hitler's eyes changed to a pale blue color, a common occurrence in people who are demon-possessed. As Eckhart was dying in December of 1923, he made a very prophetic statement. It was just this: simply, follow Hitler. He will dance, but it is I who have called the tune. I have initiated him into the secret doctrine, opened his centuries of vision, and given him the means to communicate with the powers. Do not mourn for me, Eckhart said, for I shall have influenced history more than any other German. Dietrich Eckhart was one of Europe's most dedicated and practiced Satanists of the Tula Society. He repeatedly told his fellow adepts in the Tula group that he received a satanic message, that he was destined to prepare the vessel of the Antichrist, the man inspired by Lucifer to conquer the world and lead the Aryan race to glory. Eckhart thoroughly trained Hitler in all aspects of black magic. He transformed him into one of the greatest occult adepts in history, one of the greatest orators with the power of the word, of his actions, of his body language, of his movement. Eckhart selected Hitler for training in one of the highest forms of black magic, magic which had been perfected thousands of years earlier, and resurrected again in the modern times by Aleister Crowley. This black magic took sexual perversion, sexual illuminism, to a degree unheard of. The rituals and rites involved perverse and highly sadistic sexual rituals, animal sacrifices, heterosexual orgies, blood scourgings, sodomy. You see, Aleister Crowley discovered that indulging in the most sadistic rituals opened doors to penetrating visions into the workings of evil intelligence and gave him phenomenal magical powers. Hitler was incredibly tortured during these ritual sessions, including the initiation of Hitler in a monstrous sadistic magic ritual which made Hitler smooth, as they say, between the legs. In other words, unable to give pleasure to any woman. This monstrous act made Hitler incapable of any normal sexual activity, but it did fill him with supernatural hatred and venom, which was the source of his power. The fear he created around him, the loyalty that he demanded. Make one mistake, he kills you. His perversion was so monstrous by then that he was capable of planning and executing the most terrible deeds humanity was to ever see. The monstrosities he committed were so terrifying that historians, biographers could not or would not see or try to even understand. Other people who wrote about Hitler are being unable to perceive that sexual perversion was the central key, the central driver in his life. They dealt with the question of a fragmented way by saying things like Hitler's impotent or Hitler's bad attitude toward women made him do it. No, they failed to understand that a monstrous sexual perversion was the very core of his existence, the source of his satanic clairvoyant powers and energy, and the motivation behind every act he committed. Hitler's supposed impotency had a deep psychological basis. He only knew sexual fulfillment through the extremes. Sadism, masochism. He could only reach sexual delight either through inflicting pain on others or from suffering pain himself. Hitler would constantly go to the red light district of Vienna when he was young to have himself tied up and whipped by any prostitute who was willing. Hitler had this type of relationship with Eva Braun, his satanic bride. Later he committed suicide even with her, supposedly. He suffered his tyranny at all other times except in the bedroom, where she became the all-powerful mistress and he was the groveling slave. This type of black magic is known among occultists as astrological magic. In 1921, Hitler was 33. Yeah, the double perfect number. He was totally possessed by the evil hierarchies of spirits and prepared to take the leadership of the National Socialist Party. Just the same age as Jesus was about to take his place at the age of 33 on the cross. Remember, Hitler considered himself to be the Antichrist and was told by the Tula Society that he was, and that they would back him and give him the power and show him how. And so did many other occultists in the world at this time. In reality, Adolf Hitler was the immediate forerunner of the true Antichrist to come. Hitler was the seventh mystery king of Revelation that's listed in the King James Version of the Bible. The true Antichrist will be the eighth mystery king and will be exactly like him when his true colors are shown. I'm the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. The show's called View from Space, and there's more right after this. I'm the guy to call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. So, last Thursday, we had the 93rd French terrorist attack. 93rd since the 19th century. On the Champs-Élysées, one of the most famous avenues in the world, showcased, along with King George V, who was the one who changed the Saxe-Coburg name to Windsor after his favorite castle because of the German sentiment that was anti-German because they're a German family. Now, once again, Germany, the powerhouse of the European Union and the old Roman Empire, has a possible disruptor in the wings coming by May 7th. It could be Marine Le Pen, who will want to undo a lot of what the EU and France have agreed to over the years and change the European Union drastically, because I've said this many times that the European Union is going to go through some drastic changes. And it is coming to fruition. You can see it coming. Is this May 7th election going to be a huge step in that direction? I believe it is. So let me get back to the words black magic and white magic. By the way, why I'm talking about Hitler tonight is because it was Hitler's birthday that terrorist attack at the Champs-Élysées happened on April 20th. So what is exactly meant by black magic and white magic? Most New Agers won't even use these words openly anymore because of the bad connotation which they believe is associated with them. So they use the words right-hand path to refer to white magic and left-hand path to refer to black magic. The coming Antichrist, supposedly produced by the Great White Brotherhood, the white magic side, is going to be identical to Adolf Hitler. Hitler desperately wanted to possess the spear of destiny too. Supposedly, the spear the Roman soldier used to pierce the side of Jesus Christ. That's what the spear of destiny is. It's a talisman for great world leaders who have the world as their goal. All occultists covet religious relics like that because they are supposed to inherently possess power. This belief in the power of relics is one of the most basic common points of occultists in every land of every age. Whenever you see a system of worship that covets religious talismans, relics, you know you're looking at an occultic system of worship, no matter what their outward look might be. Occultists put great power in the spear of destiny, also known as the spear of Longinus. Supposedly the leaders who possess it and understands the powers it serves also holds the destiny of the world in his hands, for good or for evil. This spear has been held by the House of Habsburg, the royal family in Vienna, Austria, for centuries, and is on display now in the museum. One of Hitler's first official acts, once he annexed Austria, was to drive to Vienna in a motorcade, go to that museum, and take physical possession of the Spear of Destiny. At that precise moment, Hitler believed he possessed the power to overcome all odds, defeat anything that stood in his way, and to conquer the world. That's when World War II became inevitable. A while later, when Hitler chose the backward swastika as the symbol of the Nazi Party, because the forward swastika is actually a sun worshipper symbol. He reversed it. White magic occultists, you see, believe that the sun worshipper symbol, the swastika, turned the one way, but Hitler turned it backward, meaning he chose the black magic path. And they realized that he was going to use the power for evil, not good, when the backward swastika was chosen as a symbol of the Nazi Party. And they also realized he possessed the spear of destiny, one of the great talismans that had to be possessed by a leader who could possibly conquer the world. The coming Antichrist will also highly covet the spear of destiny. Once he has this spear, he will believe that he has the occult power of the universe behind him. Satan is the power behind this spear, believe me, which is why Hitler became increasingly demonically afflicted the more he stood in front of it. Also, Hitler devoted his life to hunting down the legendary Holy Grail, what I talk about so often on this show. The Holy Grail is supposedly the cup or dish used by Jesus at the Last Supper, preserved by Joseph of Arimathea, who brought it to Spain or Britain and was searched for by many of his knights. The occult legend began to build a unique meaning into this Holy Grail. It came to represent a unique Western path to transcendent consciousness, even. Occultists generally believe that if you are to truly obtain this Holy Grail, you must learn the art of black magic. The word Grail, by the way, was taken from the word graduel, which means gradually, step by step, and degree by degree. This concept of gradualism has been the method used by the Illuminati to bring the New World Order about, and is definitely the modus operandi of controlled change through controlled conflict, which is what we're going through. Because, you see, the chaos has to be created in order for the change to come about. That's the controlled conflict. The coming Antichrist will also come out of Europe, just as Hitler did, and he will also be deeply immersed into this uniquely European black magic art, this medieval occultism and ritual magic. Hitler was first demonically possessed when he was only 15. You see, the occultist believes that the forces of the universe have allowed each individual the free will to determine for themselves whether or not they will use the secrets and powers of the occult for good or evil. If a person chooses to exercise his occult powers for good, he is said to have chosen the right-hand path and is practicing white magic. It supposedly helps people, white magic does. I cast a spell on you to get well. You know, that kind of thing. Now, if a person chooses to exercise his occultic powers for evil, he is said to have chosen the left-hand path and is practicing black magic, the kind of magic that harms people. Hitler practiced black magic. Anton LaVey, in his book, The Satanic Bible, states boldly that only Satanists have the courage to know who they're really serving. The New Age Dictionary defines right and left-hand paths in this way. It's the New Age Dictionary. Right-hand path, journey to wisdom based on faith, light, and avoidance of sensual pleasures, the perfections. The left-hand path, tantric path, way of magic, occultism. Tantra is further defined as a meditative sexual union in Hinduism, Buddhism, and yoga. Once a person gets to a certain elevated place on their path to acquire the knowledge of the powers of the occult, they will have to choose whether they will use the powers they have acquired for good or for evil. This is why the right-handed path is the journey wisdom based on faith, light, and avoidance of sensual pleasures, while the left-hand path is the journey based on indulgences and the sensual pleasures and on the use of magic and occultism, both black, evil terms to harm people. Tantric, from Sanskrit, literally means warp. From tantoti, he stretches, weaves, akin to Greek tynan, which is to stretch. It's the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. More next. Thanks so much for your emails tonight. There's been so many of them, and I've got so much to talk about tonight. I haven't gotten to them, and I should. I'm so sorry. The address is space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. I'm talking about black and white magic and Adolf Hitler. Hitler's birthday last Thursday, which was the 93rd terrorist attack in France over the centuries, since the 19th century. This time at the incredibly famous Champs-Élysées Boulevard. In the early 1930s, occultists the world over were in a state of anxious anticipation because they were expecting this great one to arise. In 1933, most occult leaders, including Alice Bailey, believed Adolf Hitler was to be this great one that was to come, this eighth mystery king, or seventh, rather. But soon after gaining power, Hitler chose the swastika as his national symbol, and he turned it around backwards, so it was backwards, signifying to the entire occult world that he had left and chose the evil black magic path. The leaders of the right-hand path throughout the world were reading and writing, and the decision was made that the New World Order would not be established for evil, but for good. So the die was cast to determine whether the coveted New World Order would be delivered on the evil terms of black magic Hitler, or on the good terms of white magic Roosevelt and Churchill. Since both occultists believed in the unique power of the triangle relationships, the major combatants in World War II formed the two occult triangles of allies: the black magic triangle of Germany, Italy, Japan, against the white magic triangle of Great Britain, the United States, and Russia. White magic fighting black magic. World War II. He was listening to Wagner's Rienzi play when he became possessed. Talking of Hitler, the first performance of Richard Wagner's Rienzi was in Dresden, October of 1842. It lasted 6 hours. It's said to be that he contemplated making 2 operas out of it, but it was inspired by Edward Bulwer-Lytton's book, Rienzi, the last of the Roman tribunes. Born in England, by the way, Lytton. Educated at Trinity College. Trinity is the 3, isn't it? The triangle. The perfect number. The perfect shape. His childhood friend, Gutzel Kubizek, watched in horror as a being began speaking out of Hitler's mouth in a most unusual voice. This voice began speaking visions of how Hitler was going to change European history. That one day he would receive a mandate from his people to lead them from servitude to the heights of freedom, a special mission which would one day be entrusted to him. And that would not be fulfilled for many years, but the vision came true. Hitler climbed to the pinnacle of power in Germany, backed by satanic black magic power. This being, this power, this Antichrist consciousness spirit, which New Agers believe will come upon their specially appointed chosen one, changing him from a mere human into this divine teacher and leader whom all the people were waiting for, set up for. The Antichrist will also become demonically possessed at a very early age. He will also receive a vision of his role in world affairs at an early age. This satanic spirit will give him that unbelievable power, enabling him to destroy just as Hitler did. When Hitler stood in front of the Spear of Destiny display at the Habsburg Treasure House Museum in Vienna, staring at that spear, couldn't even imagine the strange sensations that exploded inside of his head. As Hitler later said, the spear appeared to be some sort of magical medium of revelation. It brought a whole new world of ideas into such close and living perspective that human imagination became more real than the world of sense. He said, I felt as though I, myself, had held it in my hands before in some early century of history, that I, myself, had once claimed it as my talisman of power and held the destiny of the world in my hands. Yet how could this be possible? What sort of madness was this that was invading his mind and creating such turmoil in his heart? And Hitler also thoroughly believed in reincarnation, no fear of death, coming back again in another body. I believe the beginnings of Hitler losing his sanity to the powers of Satan can be traced back to that very moment when he was in his early 20s, demonically possessed since the age of 15. Then his mind loses its sanity. All Europe would pay the price, too, both in war and with all the genocidal killings that he did. Biblical prophecy says the power of the Antichrist would be great, but not his own power, and that he would destroy. History proves that Hitler touched off a war that was the most destructive in world history to this point, and his genocidal programs went beyond anything the world had ever seen before. This coming Antichrist, that will be just like him, will also reach the point probably early in life where he loses his mind because of his immersion into the world of the satanic occult. This man will be putting on displays that a practitioner of white magic, but in his heart will be as black as Hitler's. And just as Hitler believed in reincarnation, so the Antichrist, whose coming will claim many past lifetimes. Finally, he'll destroy more than Hitler ever did, and his fight will be totally unrestrained. They're getting you and I prepared now for him. Today, they're doing it, and have been for a while with their 6-step attitudinal change plan. How, you ask? Simple. Some examples in action right now. Population control through death making. You know what that is? The New World Order goal is to reduce the total world population by 2/3. As the world nears the entrance to this New World Order, your mind must be voluntarily changed to accept population reduction measures, because these methods will be used a lot by the forces of the Antichrist once he arises to reduce the world's population by 2/3. The Illuminati feels people might as well get used to them now, and might as well be voluntarily persuaded to support them now. Ready? Suicide. Euthanasia. See what they've done with suicide just lately? The policemen or the soldiers that have, rather it was the soldiers that had committed suicide. And I believe it was police, are now being put on the honor roll as heroes, dying in service. Euthanasia. We just passed a law here in Canada, this country, where this show emanates from. AVFS, Talk Radio, AM 640. Euthanasia. Doctors. Hey, you can now go to the doctor to die. Yeah. There's doctors that will give you the death serum if you meet the criteria. So, it used to be that you'd go to a doctor to get well. Now, at least in Canada, and spreading to other parts, you'd go to a doctor to die. Welcome to the 21st century. Space, AM 640. More next. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. It's a view from space. I communicate by email. It's the only way. Spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you sent me. I really appreciate them. I really do. I'm showing you now how they're preparing you, the attitudinal change plan that is underway for this New World Order, this New Age movement that's coming. Climate change is a big monster part of it, and as you can say, they're pushing Earth Day rather heavily this year. This is going to be taking the place of Easter and all of those religious holidays that fall into this time. It's going to be the worship of Gaia, Mother Earth, who is a being, a spirit, they believe. And there is a change plan of attitudes. Right now, the terrorist attacks that have been happening in France, especially. 19 of them since 2015. Their attitudinal change catalysts, these attacks. And they're changing the presidency, I believe, with this latest one, this Champs-Élysées attack on Hitler's birthday. April 20th, last Thursday. So, I've covered population control through death making, suicide, euthanasia. And there's another one on this plan. And let me just finish off with euthanasia, killing yourself. You can now go. I finished the last segment off talking about how you can go to a doctor now to die. Stroke of genius, the Illuminati believe, to design this campaign to get people to kill themselves for the benefit of society and make them think it was their idea. The great costs that are involved with health care plans for looking after the aged don't have to anymore. Eliminate the cost. Because after all, it's the bottom line, isn't it? cost. Have them kill themselves. Make it legal. The sheer repetition, years ago, started by Jack Kevorkian. A lot of the instances of suicides and of loved ones assisting in the death of an ill person, and the endless debates in the media provided the sheer repetition of over and over again. Repetition is how you brainwash. And the end is in sight for the completion of this step very soon. Abortion. 1.5 million preborn babies murdered in the womb every year. Remember how this war was lost, do you? It was lost in government when they compromised to legally allow abortions only in limited instances, narrowly prescribed instances, where the life of the mother, for instance, might be in danger, or when the conception was a result of violent rape or incest. This compromise was seen as noble. Then law moves in. You know, they rule by the rule of law. Roe versus Wade kicked down the door, and now abortion is practiced in all 3 trimesters of pregnancy. So that's death. The destruction of Africa for 20 years or more. No more. 30, 40. You've been bombarded with millions of heart-wrenching pictures, even since you were a child. If you were in your mid-30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s listening to me. Of black people starving to death in Africa. We've gone through so many campaigns to get massive food programs, haven't we, to all of these places. Well, that's really got old fast, hasn't it? People are starting now to see through it all, to get fed up with it all, and are undoubtedly starting to ask the question, what's wrong with these people? Why can't they ever learn to feed themselves and govern themselves? Because it keeps going over and around and around and around in the same way. They never, ever. You still see it today. You go down into the small villages in Africa and living in grass huts, still pounding grain outside of their huts with sticks and a wooden bowl. The blacks are targeted for extinction. How can you tell? The only races allowed to enter the final stage of this new world order are going to be European whites and Chinese. Oriental. Anyone else is targeted for extinction. What better way to prepare you and others throughout the world for what the Illuminati feels is a worthlessness race than to convince you of the basic worthlessness of Africa? The campaign is now on and is backed by every new revelation of massive problems in Africa, from chronic starvation to disease to ignorance, and on and on and on it goes. Not to even mention for one moment the racism in America. The New Age view on organ transplants is another step in this direction. Very simple. They want to live indefinitely, the elites. Until medical science can solve the problem of physical death, the only conceivable way to live indefinitely is organ transplants. So medical research, operating with huge grants from government, your money, and private sources, has poured hundreds of billions of dollars now into organ transplant research. Their success? Phenomenal. A lot of people are alive today because of this skill. But success got its price tag. This has become so popular that today there's a lot more demand for human organs for transplant than there are organs available in the world. This situation's led to super high prices for organs, and some organs seem almost impossible to get unless you know the right people. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640. More right after this break. And that's me. I'm the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Just giving you a heads up on the programming that you're being offered. And these new changes to life plans of the world, life, death, organ transplants, all of these are part of the New World Order and to reduce the world's population. War is another very good population reducer. So are famine and pestilence. All to come. If you read Revelation, King James Version of the Bible states clearly, these horsemen will ride again. And of course they will. They're to force us in something we don't want to do. Give total control and power over to the authority who will then control the world and all the people in it. So organ transplant is one of the ways. Now, enter the entrepreneurial spirit together with the greed and no conscience of a lot of doctors and nurses today working in great secrecy. Doctors are literally declaring their victims brain dead or some other kind of dead and are literally harvesting his or her organs. You know, there's this battle over licenses. When you get your driver's license, you might be killed in a crash, and they just want to know if they can rip out your liver or rip out your whatever they need. Harvesting from other people, which also opens that door to that huge underground business of black marketing, like in China, where the dissident prisoners are actually harvested, killed for their organs, and then sold. A fake death certificate's issued, listing some cause of death that sounds plausible. This is exactly the same thing that happened in, they don't do anything new, Nazi Germany. From the early 1930s to the 1940s. Once the state became involved in the death-making in Germany, doctors boldly killed people that Hitler's cronies declared as living lives unworthy of life. After the victim was killed, they would then issue fake death certificates. This same Nazi mentality is coupled with greed today because you can make a lot of money harvesting organs. This coming New World Order system is identical to Nazism in every detail. In 1933, when Adolf Hitler was in power, he simply committed German government power and resources behind the medical euthanasia program, aiding it further by changing German law to remove any legal barriers against it. That's how the Illuminati work, through the rule of law. But he continued allowing German doctors to carry out euthanasia. What's more, once Hitler started his systematic killing, he allowed German doctors to carry out the program of stealing their organs. German doctors in white uniforms were killing rather than healing, and seeing if they could graft that person's organ into another living body to see if it would work. In fact, there's many demonstrations that a mental change occurred in the doctors and the normal people, where killing became healing. Oh my God, that's what we're up to today. That's how close we are with our old grandmother who's in pain. She can be cured by killing her. Words were redefined to where people actually believed that they were healing by killing. It used to be the sanctity of life, the wonderful of life. Stay alive as long as you can. Fight to stay alive. Now it's fight to die. And a system that worships death. Don't believe me? Flick your tube on right now. Check any channel. There's somebody getting killed. Somebody being mutilated. Some zombie walking about. Someone plotting to harm someone else. The power of fear and death. The system we're under worships death. Hitler would have never been able to carry out his Holocaust if it was not for the conditioning effort of the German medical establishment along with him. In other words, if the German people had not been previously conditioned by the German doctors to believe in the worthiness of human euthanasia, Hitler would never been able to kill his millions. What did Hitler ever establish? Well, he established a country that was politically a total dictatorship. Economically, fascism, whereby the means of production, factories and sources of production, mines, are owned by private investors, but the federal government limits competition in every field of endeavor and controls how much of any item is produced. In other words, the federal government worked hand in hand with the private companies. Sound like today's world at all to you? I'm describing what Hitler did. I call it corporate fascism today, economically, whereby the means of production, factories and sources of production, mines are owned by private investors, but the federal government limits competition in every field of endeavor and controls how much of any item is produced. In other words, the federal government works hand in hand with the elite private corporations. Corporate fascism. Spiritually, Germany was changed by Hitler. Just as, and I'm bringing Hitler up and what he did because I'm showing you what the new leader that's coming will also do. Spiritually, Hitler changed Germany. The dictator is also the spiritual leader now. He functions as the high priest of the occult mysteries religion. Hitler was an avowed worshiper of Satan, and he re-established the old secret satanic mysteries to public worship. Likewise, the coming New World Order Antichrist has precisely this goal in mind, with the Superman, the Antichrist, fulfilling that role of Hitler. We're not quite at that point yet. But the necessary groundwork is quickly being laid and is shockingly following the same path as Hitler and Mussolini, followed by 1933 and 1938, as they prepared their countries for World War II that would establish their new world order. When Hitler came to power in 1933 in Germany, he inherited a demoralized Germany that was struggling mightily, economically and politically. I guess you could say that of Trump in America. Inherited a demoralized country that was struggling mightily, economically and politically. When I say struggling mightily economically, I mean 1% growth. Not quite 2. Well, got to 2. And politically, gridlock. On Capitol Hill, nothing got done except regulations. Piled upon regulations. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, had devastated Deutschland, Germany, economically, rendering her money nearly worthless and her economy badly stalled. Germans were also suffering a tragic loss of national esteem. Hitler steps to the podium immediately, lays out a plan for reconstruction. Germany, he said, would be powerful and prosperous again. A major part of his reconstruction project was his plan to appeal to the tremendous patriotism which he knew to be deep within the hearts of his fellow Germans. I guess you could say the same with Trump in America right now. A major part of his Reconstruction project was his plan to appeal to the tremendous patriotism in the hearts of his fellow Americans. That's why he's saying, invest in America, buy America. You want to sell in America? Build in America. I'm going to make America great again. Hitler called for a new social conscience to spring forward like a mighty stream of water from his people. Suddenly the propaganda floodgates opened wide for him, directing a barrage of propaganda and pressure towards helping one another and caring. At the beginning, this pressure was voluntary, depending upon the age-old concept of peer pressure. As Germans who immediately sprang forth to participate began to urge their family and friends to also participate. German industry and business leaders also immediately stepped forward with plans of their own that would support the program that Hitler had enunciated. Employees of a textile plant, for example, volunteered to work extra hours. Donate the proceeds to victims of accidents. Other workers volunteered to donate 1% of their salaries to this national effort, too. This program of encouraging Germans to volunteer, hitting on their patriotism, proved very successful. By 1935, you see how you can manipulate the masses if you know the magical black magic tricks, the white magical tricks. By 1935, Hitler plunged Germany into the next phase. Hitler issued a law that stated that a person who wished to attend a college or university had to be partaking in this volunteer program. Suddenly, all the rules have changed. Now the federal government was dictating that German citizens had to volunteer. That huge line between individual freedom and dictatorship was crossed easily, with not one German that saw what was happening. Couldn't see through it. Hitler was so much encouraged at how easy Germans accepted his forced volunteering, so encouraged that he began to implement other steps to move Germany into fascist dictatorship. The great majority of Germans had no idea what had happened to them, and they were not to find out for 3 more whole years. The day after Hitler forced the volunteering looked as normal as any other day. If someone had stepped forward to try to educate the public as to what had just happened to them and what the consequences would be, no one would have believed them. Sort of like this show when I first started. It had been laughed off the podium. Such is the condition, I believe, of America and most of the world today, as we move inexorably toward the identical fascist government system. Because the Illuminati never do anything new. They just simply repeat history. Back with more. It's Talk Radio AM 640 on Space. It's the Spaceman. Say the FS on Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. You know how I feel about the ones that write simply so strongly supporting what I do. And, of course, I get a lot of critique on people that are first-time listeners that check out this show. But whatever your view, even if it's not a view from space and you agree with, I'm glad you're here. So the key work which uniquely pushed Germany into Hitler's Holocaust was published in 1920, It was called The Permission to Destroy Life Unworthy of Life. And I'm going back in history because the Illuminati, as I said before the end of that last break, they don't do anything new. They're going to repeat. This Antichrist coming is going to do what Hitler did and what Nero did. The German authors stressed the therapeutic goal of that concept, destroying life unworthy of life, is purely a healing treatment and a healing work. These German authors explored the doctor's legal responsibility in death assistance, what we're doing today in 2017, and the killing of the consenting participant, which is exactly what we're doing today. This is in 1920 in Germany. He advocated a carefully controlled juridical process with applications for killing evaluated by a 3-person panel. First was a general physician, then a psychiatrist, and then a lawyer. A patient who had given his consent to be killed would have the right to withdraw that consent at any time, but there was also an emphasis on the legal protection of physicians involved in the killing process. One lawyer insisted that such a policy of killing was compassionate and consistent with medical ethics. And this paper touched off a firestorm of debate within the German medical community in those times. The majority view was horrified at the thesis of this radical paper, and they spoke out against it. When Hitler took power in 1933, only a minority of German doctors and nurses believed in the satanic view of human euthanasia. Yet, Hitler was able to manipulate them into action to transform the entire nation into the killing machine, either with the patient's permission or secretly misapplying medical technology. I think we gave him too strong a dosage. He's dead. Hitler then threw the resources and authority of the federal government behind this ongoing policy of euthanasia. A bunch of films created that powerfully supported the concept. One of them was incredibly powerful. It was called I Accuse. This film depicted a physician giving a lethal injection to his incurably ill wife in response to her desperate plea that he do it so as to relieve her of her terrible pain and suffering. The doctor was arrested for murder and brought to trial. A sympathetic jury in the movie, sympathetic jury member stated emphatically that the most important precondition is that the patient wants it. But the real message of the film, and the one that came through loud and clear, was that an exception to that volunteer principle should be made for the mentally ill, where the state of mind must take over the responsibility. The state will then step in and make the decision for that person. This one sentence opened the door to outright prohibition against the formerly disgusting practice of human euthanasia. Once this door was opened, Hitler's propaganda machine was able to push it forward into the open daily, more and more, until killing was being carried out openly. Hitler cleverly utilized a well-thought-out plan that gradually changed a person's attitude or value about that particular subject, and in this case, human euthanasia, without that person ever being aware that they were being manipulated to make such a change. It's called brainwashing. Being it socially acceptable by all. Just because everybody does it doesn't mean it's right. Can I repeat that? Just because everyone does it doesn't make it right. Medical researchers are developing more and more and more users for the body tissues of dead people, babies' bodies, and they'll dramatically increase the economic demand for such tissue, too. This new economic demand will be the final push that leads to human vegetable farms. Know what I mean? Fetal tissue harvesting. What a satanic procedure, and it's in practice now. Pregnant women, 13 to 18 weeks, are placed on an operating table. If this turns your stomach, you should turn the radio down right now. I'll give you a moment. Women 13 to 18 weeks pregnant, placed on an operating table, cervix dilated, bag of water broken, fetal or baby head, depending on your view of abortion, is guided into position just above the open cervix. The fetal skull is drilled open with a drill, and a suction device is placed into the brain. The brain tissue is then suctioned out and placed immediately on ice to preserve its viability. The fetus, or baby, is then aborted or murdered. Again, depending on your view. Aborted, murdered. You pick the word for your state of mind. Hitler was pursuing the same New World Order goal that we are currently heading for. And he firmly believed that he was the Antichrist. They told him he was. He believed it. After all, he'd received his occult training from Meister Dietrich Eckhart, Tula Society, the occult leader of the Luciferian Tula Secret Society. Eckhart had been informed by his guiding spirit that Adolf was the coming great one, and that he was to spare no effort to train him in all the deepest matters of the occult. In many worship meetings, Eckhart called forth the spirit of the Antichrist into Hitler many times. Spaceman, Talk Radio, AM 640. Just going through some of the things we're being programmed with right now that were already done in history. If you know history, you know what's coming, because we're back to the future. Get my meaning. Space, Talk Radio, AM 640. There's more right after this. It's the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. So I'm just comparing what has happened already in history to what is in our future. Cannibalism. Huh? Soylent Green first introduced that subject. The movie. I know you've heard about it. As people were eating delicious green wafers that turned out to be processed human flesh. Then a few years ago, people flocked to watch the movie Silence of the Lambs. Another conditioning vehicle about eating human flesh. Cannibalism, one of the newest forms of pornography, I guess you could call it. Now you know why news items are covering people eating one another. Population control by conflict is also going on today, fostering conflict between men and women. The feminist movement and the gay movement, what's that about? Why are they pushing it so hard? Why is it so much about what's between people's legs and not what's between people's ears anymore? What is that about? If men and women are fighting amongst each other, and widely distrust each other, the plan is that fewer marriages will take place. Fewer sexual liaisons will occur. Both possibilities will limit the number of children conceived and born. How many women want to get married if the typical male is the stereotype being created and shown on the TV sitcoms? Men behaving badly. If marriages that already exist can be destabilized and even broken up, the number of children can be reduced. Society as a whole is also destabilized, another major part of the plan. That's why the push for homosexuality, lesbianism, conditioning, changing of sex, transgenders, population control, and disarmament. Disarmament planned well before the nuclear bomb, as Alice Bailey boldly wrote in April of 1940. In the preparatory period for the New World Order, Bailey wrote, there will be a steady and regulated disarmament. It will not be optional. No nation will be permitted to produce and organize any equipment for destructive purposes or to infringe the security of any other nation. I now put it to you, it's going on with North Korea and America. And China involved. The enabler of North Korea. The disarming of nations will not be optional. It's coming. The plan is for each nation to systematically turn over its weapons to the planned one world government body known as the United Nations. Since the UN was established, the world has actually fought several wars under either the UN umbrella or as an alliance of nations, NATO. Gulf War II was used to make sure no sovereign nation would ever again attack another nation ever unilaterally. When the United Nations gets complete, absolute power over all the nations of the world, when they plug it in finally, they get that leader, the Antichrist leader. The New Agers naively believe that the UN will exercise benevolent and wise leadership. But I'll tell you now, the real plan, again, quoting Alice Bailey, the atomic bomb, the nuclear bomb, does not belong to the three nations who perfected it. It belongs to the United Nations to use. Yeah. The aggressive action on the part of any nation that rears its ugly head will be put down by NATO, the United Nations. Now, the desensitization of individuals, men and women, done through the use of television, cartoons, violent shows, they're all desensitizing. And they're desensitizing your children. You're playing directly into the hands of the New World Order planners. Let them watch that crap. Radio, the harshest influence in radio and other audio channels is popular music. Check the lyrics out on most of the tunes. Hello. Tells you where it's coming from. Where the heart really is. And computers. Ooh, a major influence on children, both girls and guys, in desensitizing them. But again, boys seem to be more impacted. Computer action games are very violent. And a lot of them use occultic symbols. Well, no, they all do. Games that blow people up, blow things up, that have individuals and groups physically battling are also good examples of the type of stimuli which hardens the heart and minds of its victims. Seriously. The internet is also full of such vile material, from porn to sexual perversions to violence to talking with strangers about anything under the sun, that you must take control of this medium as well. Magazines, major contributor to the desensitization of children. Not so much as it used to be. Both boys and girls, not only did they promote violence, but they also have a way of teaching both boys and girls to care only for themselves, to be selfish. Girls' magazines, excellent in arousing a narcissistic attitude amongst their young readers. Most horribly also, detective magazines are also so explicit in their stories about crimes against women that studies have shown a link to actually have people read them and revert to that world of crime against women. Being influenced them so much they do it themselves. Get the idea from it. Comic books, very satanic these days. Their looks, their storylines, their themes. Advertising. More bombardment of these messages with hundreds, thousands of words per day by the various mass media outlets. Advertisers understand this, which is why they're willing to spend billions of dollars per year in advertising budgets. And the vegetarian movement, one of the common denominators of occult groups from every era this world has ever seen, is that they taught and followed a vegetarian diet. Hitler was a strict vegetarian. You know that? The New Age religion teaches vegetarianism. A lot of witchcraft, both white and black magic, teaches vegetarianism. And today, massive efforts by all sorts of environmental groups, state and federal governments, provincial agencies are mounting efforts to convince us all it's unsafe to eat all kinds of meat. And climate change, extreme environmentalism, ozone depletion. Carbon dioxide is the biggest enemy of man. Deforestation, elimination of fishing water, pollution of lakes and streams, which was really done by major corporations, not by the average guy. I only have to offer you the plan as written in the mid to late 1700s. When we come into our kingdom, the New World Order meant, our orators will expound great problems which have turned humanity upside down in order to bring it, at the end, under our beneficent rule. Who will ever suspect then that all these people were stage managed by us according to a political plan which no one has so much as guessed as in the course of many centuries? And changing people's religious beliefs. That's another big change that they're asking the world to make. Get rid of your old religion and make way for the new one. Changing people's religious beliefs through movie industry, television shows, scandals. Liberal Christians attacking fundamental Christians. Islam warring with Christianity. Well, extremists, as they're saying. And the conditioning to accept the legalization of drugs. That's where we are today here in Canada. Going to be the first nation after, because there is one more that has legalized marijuana before Canada. Do you know who it is? Uruguay. And guess what? The leaders in Canada got their blueprint directly from Uruguay on how much people could use legally, how much they can grow. It all came from them. There's no thought-out plan. It's a New World Order plan to accept legalization of drugs. It's Spaceman, Talk Radio, AM 640. More right after this break. As I compare the past with the coming future, they are the same. We got to call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Thanks for the one that you've sent. This man called P from Washington, D.C. on gay marriages, population control is my postulation for that, for the actual promotion of it. Couldn't agree more. As a gay guy, I guarantee you that we are born this way. It's 99% genetics. The reason we have gays is because of the societal pressure to marry. It keeps the gene around. Historically, people married, had kids, then realized they're gay and divorce, or suppress it, or just fool around on the side. Now, you're supposed to be out before you've reached puberty. Remember the UK study last year? That less than 50% of students identified themselves as straight. End result? Lower population, and ultimately the eradication of gays. My emailer states, a gay man himself from Washington. There's also this movement, New Age element, to earnestly attempt to legalize prostitution. You consistently used to hear about it almost weekly. Not as much anymore, because some of those laws have been broken down and they are close to legalization, but not there yet. But it's population control, isn't it? Prostitutes don't get pregnant. And this one. How many flicks and television shows have you seen pushing this agenda? Conditioning to accept existence of aliens. The situation's actually getting ridiculous, you know. After years of this constant deluge of promotion for extraterrestrial life, not from the flicks as much anymore as from news headlines from the science so-called / black magic community. Strange aliens from other worlds. Star Trek, Star Wars, television, movies. We got flooded with all sorts of propaganda. Pseudo-documentaries about extraterrestrials, life on Mars and beyond, and ever-increasing occultism all throughout. Science fiction novels, comic books, magazines, eyewitness accounts of UFOs. What's going on here? Well, first, here's a few facts. First, an admission from New Agers themselves. In 1982, Michael London of the LA Times gathered together a group of 8 people experienced an UFO and extraterrestrial encounters, supposedly, for a special screening of Steven Spielberg's movie E.T. London, this writer, noted the following reaction of the group at the movie. It's a true movie, not a romance. It's part of a conditioning process to prepare us for the arrival of alien beings, was the consensus. What alien beings could possibly be arriving? Which brings me to the next stage. When the Antichrist appears on the world stage, he will claim to be ascended from another dimension. An alien being that is friendly and just has our best interests at heart. The bloodline will be from the ascended master's alien bloodline. New Agers understand that a belief in the claims of the Antichrist will be accepted more easily and by many, many more people if these people will have been conditioned to believe that the existence of friendly aliens. The Illuminati have been planning as far back as you can go in history to invent an artificial threat from outer space in order to bring humanity together in a one-world government, which they call the New World Order. Remember Orson Welles? The old radio program, War of the Worlds, which convinced its listening audience that Martians do exist and that they were invading Earth? How about the movie Independence Day? And just so many others. The latest was a palindrome. Just an incredible propaganda tool for the existence of aliens. One other matter that I'd like to touch on is the supposed discovery of life on Mars. And the plan to discover life on Mars, by the way, is at the very end of the preparatory period that leads into the New World Order, so that we have to be very close now. We even have Mars trips planned with no way to get there yet. The reason, and people have signed up on a one-way trip. The reasons for creating this myth are to further increase the believability of all these alien and UFO shows and to destroy the Judeo-Christian belief system, which clearly states that God created a unique world here with a people that are made in His image, for which Jesus Christ came to redeem them from sin. This entire belief structure is to come tumbling down in ruins. It'll be destroyed because people will start to believe in life on Mars. It's Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. There's more. It's right after this break. Got an opinion? Got some information you'd like to pass along? Got a critique of the show? Just want to say where in the world you're listening to AVFS on Talk Radio, AM 640 from. Two addresses. Communicate by email, spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Just been talking about how the past is really our future, which is really what a palindrome is. It's the same backwards as it is forward. As I was saying, the latest sci-fi flick about aliens is a palindrome, The Arrival. That motion picture put out in 2016. It's just the latest. And one more thing. Don't believe in the carefully created myth that the federal government agency, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is an objective science organization interested in only provable scientific fact. Nothing could be further from the truth. NASA is a federal government agency that is fully in sync with the plans and purposes of the New World Order. Careful advertising has been carried out, which paints this picture of scientific objectivity. In the same vein, television stations, newspapers, magazines all run carefully created advertising campaigns, too, that trumpet their objectivity and professional journalism. Why do they do that? Because the research shows that the listening and watching public is far more likely to believe their stories if they have been first conditioned to believe in the objectivity of the station. So don't be deceived. There's no objectivity with NASA. They believe in electional science. I want it to be this way, so let's gather some facts that point to it and me being correct. There's going to be fundamental changes to our system of government, too, with the New World Order. Here's their plan in a nutshell. In order for the U.S., United States of America, to enter into the New World Order, global government, we have to dissolve our current system of government of the people, which is protected by the Constitution, their Bill of Rights. Same with any other democratized country. But this tremendous change has to occur with the people's consent and the people's blessing. Now, you might ask, why would any thinking citizen of any democratized country be willing to dissolve a system of government that's given an unprecedented bunch of freedoms for over 200 years and more in some cases, which has allowed freedom of expression and pursuit of happiness and prosperity, which has in turn created the most wonderful standard of living the world has ever seen in history? The first step is to create an entire class of citizens, listen carefully, who are not thinking. Stupid people that don't know anything but to text their friends and the latest TV show they liked or the latest video game they played. Not thinking, not learning. The more you learn, the more you know. The less you learn, the less you know. So, it's that New World Order plan envisioned capturing control of the school systems as far back as the turn of the century. This has been going on, and gradually dumbing down the curricula. Haven't you noticed? And everyone knows this has been done very, very well. And when the heat begins to come down on government officials for the falling academic standards, their response is to, well, blame everything and everybody else for the mess and to propose increased funding as the solution. We'll just throw the taxpayers' money at it again. Here's some more. Get rid of it. Here's some more. Get rid of it. Collect it. Put that tax up. Get rid of it. More. We're now at the point where tens of millions, no, billions of young adults around the world can't even read enough to enjoy reading newspapers or magazines or to read history for themselves, to see it's being repeated. All they want to do is watch television, flicks, play video games, and party with their friends. And if they get any news at all, they get it from the Illuminati-controlled mass media. The guys are only interested in either sports or the computer, and the girls are only interested in stylish lifestyle sections. Glamour. We're at the point described in Cooper's New Age book, Behold a Pale Horse. Experience has proven that the simplest method of gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of basic system principles on the one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance on the other hand. This is achieved by first engaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities, providing a low-quality program of public education in math, say, logic systems, designed in economics, and discouraging technical creativity. Most people think today that death's normal. No, it's not. It's a form of control. You can't spend more than you make. If you don't have it, you can't have it. If you don't have the money to get it, you can't have it. Not now. I don't have any money. I can get it anyway. Here's a card. Well, the card's maxed out? Huh. I'll use this card. Huh. They're engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence, and their indulgence in emotional physical activities by unrelating emotional affrontations and attacks. Mental and emotional rape, I call it, by way of a constant barrage of videos, flashes of sex, violence, and wars in the media, especially the television, giving them what they desire in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need. Here's another way they do it: rewriting history and the law and subjecting the public to the deviant creation. The general rule is that there is profit in confusion. The more confusion, the more profit. Therefore, the best approach is to create problems, then offer the solution. Keep the public busy with no time to think, back on the farm with all the other animals. Education is the first key to produce non-thinking citizens. I gotta say it again. Education is the first key to produce non-thinking citizens, or really great education is the first key to produce thinking citizens. Which direction do you think our systems have gone? And here's a good one. Misuse of political power. When government officials, you see, blatantly misuse money, and so often now you see it, hands caught the cookie jar, spent the people's money on yourself, or embezzled millions from the people. Government resources, private matters, they still get elected. Or do they? Are the elections fixed? Because how could someone who constantly keeps ripping you off with criminal destruction of your economy and still get elected? CEOs that lose millions and millions in a quarter still get to keep the current position. So you can, again, ascertain how unthinking we've become. And when politicians can keep telling big lies, many of which are uncovered, and still somehow find themselves in the position of power still. You know, these people, the population that can't and won't do anything about it, are ready for the slaughter. All they need is the Judas goat that's going to lead them up the slaughter ramp. And the plan calls for that to occur during a series of planned crises, conditioning the public to accept a new currency, the digital currency, no more cash in the world. And something embedded in your skin, on your body, for identification. It's being promoted quite heavily these days. No. If you really want to arrive at the truth, if you really, really, really love the truth and want to find out what's really happening, you have to develop what would be called an opposite direction thinking. In other words, truth in a lot of situations, many situations, especially strategic planning, is in the opposite direction of the public rhetoric. For instance, during a build-up to a war, for example, public rhetoric what you hear in the Illuminati-controlled mass media will speak of peace and treaties. And one thing has been proven. When you see world leaders who have obviously been building for war start talking peace, you know that the outbreak of war is probably very imminent. Here's a great quote from, I think it was George W. Bush, as a matter of fact, when he was president. You might recall it. We'll fight the global war on terrorism by spreading peace. The Treaty of Non-Aggression between Germany and the Soviet Union Socialist Republic, the USSR, back in 1939, the government of the German Reich and the government of the Soviet Union, desirous of strengthening the cause of peace between Germany and the USSR and proceeding from the fundamental provisions of the Neutrality Agreement, concluded in April of 1926 when Germany and the USSR had reached the agreement. Both high contracting parties obligate themselves to desist from any act of violence, any aggressive action, any attack on each other, either individually or jointly with other powers. This non-aggression pact was signed in Moscow August 23, 1939, between Ribbentrop of Germany and Molotov of the USSR. Likely from the same bloodline that gave us the Molotov cocktail. Even though other articles are included in this agreement, Article 1 succinctly captured the essence of the agreement. That is, both Germany and the USSR pledged to each other, to the nations of the rest of the world, that they were going to take all measures for the next 10 years to avoid conflict. Peace in our time never seemed so close to reality, and the naive global population believed them and breathed a sigh of relief, but we all know World War II was imminent. It's the Spaceman Talk Radio, AM 640. More right after this. Please direct your emails to a couple of addresses if you want to communicate with me. space640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. So I was saying before this last break, this non-aggression pact signed Moscow August 23, 1939. It was between Germany and the USSR saying, hey, peace in our time. We pledged to not attack one another, take measures for the next 10 years to avoid all conflict. So as the global population, as I said before, the break breathed a sigh of release. But there was really another story. This was the public rhetoric, the propaganda. Historians will tell you that the reality was actually found 180 degrees in the other direction, the opposite direction. Hitler wanted this non-aggression treaty so he could pursue his goal of conquering Western Europe and England without having to worry about his eastern flank, Russia. Well, USSR in those days. Stalin, on the other hand, knew that Hitler would eventually attack them and wanted this treaty to give him more time to prepare for war that he considered inevitable. I don't know if you know about this in history, but it is true. With this treaty in hand, Hitler actually launched his plan for World War II September 1st, 1939, first attacking Poland. Hitler did not actually attack the USSR until June 22, 1941. So Stalin and his generals, nearly 2 full years they had to prepare for the German onslaught they knew was coming. But publicly they said, next 10 years, not attacking, not going to harm either country. Hitler gained almost 2 full years to pursue his war to the west against Europe and Britain without having to worry about the Russians invading from the east. With that non-aggression pact, the truth of this lays completely in the opposite direction of the public rhetoric. As I've stated, Hitler ordered the German High Command to attack Poland on September 1, just 1 week after he had concluded his Treaty of Non-Aggression with Stalin. As the Poles were fighting vigorously against the Germans, the Russian army suddenly attacked Poland on September 1739 without warning or provocation, fighting a war from both directions. Poland, of course, finally capitulated October 2nd. While Hitler was attacking Poland, he directed his diplomatic efforts against Czechoslovakia. For months during the spring and summer, Hitler was demanding control over Czechoslovakia to protect the German population, he said, that was in danger. Czechoslovakia was a collection of several diverse groups of people, not the least of which were people of German descent. So once Hitler invaded Poland, September 1st, 1939. That date breaks down to a 32, a backward 23, the number that affects everyone in the world very deeply. And did it ever? That was really the beginning of it all, Hitler invading Poland for the Second World War. Britain and France became very alarmed. The British Prime Minister Chamberlain flew to Berchtesgaden, Germany, on September 15th to see if there was any hope for peace in Europe. Then Chamberlain was operating under the illusion that Britain, France, and Hitler's Germany shared a common enemy in communism, the Russians. Therefore, he tried to negotiate with Hitler to join their ranks to fight communist Russia. Hitler, though, was miles ahead of Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister. In his strategic thinking, Hitler promised, "This is the last territorial claim I have to make in Europe." He warned that unless Sudetenland, rights of self-determination and return to the Reich, were accepted, Germany would invade Czechoslovakia, even at the risk of a world war. Chamberlain left Berchtesgaden, convinced that Hitler was dead serious, but he felt he could still negotiate a peace for the world. Hitler's public and private assurance to Chamberlain on September 15th was that this is the last territorial claim that Hitler would make in Europe. What a huge lie that was. He already had ordered the German High Command to be ready in early October for a full-scale invasion of Czechoslovakia. As his historian can tell you, the British and French were determined not to fight for Czechoslovakia. Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, made the comment that he was being asked to go to war for a country far away, about which he knew nothing about. The U.S. President Roosevelt diplomatically intervenes, urging Hitler and the European leaders to solve their problems without resorting to war. September 28, 1939. A special four-power conference set up. Munich, Germany, between the French Premier Daladier, Britain's Chamberlain, Germany's Hitler, Italy's Mussolini. After a lot of talk, Chamberlain and Daladier accepted Hitler's demands for the major part of Czechoslovakia, depending upon Hitler's assurance that he had no further territorial demands on Europe. That's as far as it's going to go. Chamberlain left that meeting in Munich on September 30th, 1939, and flew back to England. As he arrived, he made his infamous statement, "I believe it is peace in our time." As the historians will tell you, he was greeted with cheers and relief. In other words, the naive publicly, warmly, and tightly accepted and embraced and loved Chamberlain's delusion, his lie, even though other politicians like Churchill began to immediately warn the people not to be deceived. Hitler wanted no time moving into action. Munich was a great triumph for Hitler. The Fuhrer was able to put Operation Green into action on schedule. German armies marched into a non-resistant Czechoslovakia. The German generals couldn't believe Hitler pulled off another bloodless victory, and they called off their plot against him. They were going to kill him. but wow, he did it again without having one guy shot. Let's ride the wave with this dude. And the reality? Well, it lies exactly in the opposite direction of the public rhetoric. You gotta have reverse thinking. Hitler's historic example of this principle also gives rise to another one. When war preparations are evident and close to completion, leaders will suddenly start speaking about peace. So, one of the clearest indications that military action is really close is when politicians and military leaders who have been observed making detailed war preparations suddenly begin talking peace. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. There's more right after this break. It's Spaceman, Talk Radio AM 640. This is the final segment, tonight's show. You know, during the first 4 years of quietly murdering people in individual hospitals, as I was talking about earlier with Adolf Hitler, nursing homes, mental institutions throughout a deliberate misuse of medical treatment, enough mistakes has been made that the word began to get out to certain learned German citizens and community leaders that the greatest voice against this genocide came from the Protestant church leaders. These voices of protest even learned that the secret name given to this genocidal project of Hitler's was called the T4 program. And I know there's a lot of Canadians that would be sort of chuckling right now, because you see our T4 slips are our integral part of our tax return and our taxation in this country. It's called the T4 slip. But with Hitler, the T4 program was quietly murdering genocide, is what it was. As the voices of protest grew immensely, Nazi leaders actually became very concerned that the average German citizen would turn against them and therefore make it impossible for all Jews and all devalued people to be eliminated as Hitler's satanic vision demanded. So, amidst great public rhetoric, the German government announced that it was discontinuing the T4 program, to the great relief of a lot of German citizens and leaders. But the T4 officially ceased as a program, but that turned out to be another deceptive lie. Widespread killing continued in a second phase, sometimes referred to in Nazi documents as wild euthanasia, because doctors could now act on their own initiative concerning who would live or die. In fact, the Nazis even made a great show of taking apart the gas chambers it was using, convincing even more people that they were stopping the genocidal killing. But the Nazis quietly shipped these gas chamber parts to the east, where they set them up all over again and planned the next and final phase of the killing. So the reality again lied in the opposite direction of the public rhetoric, what they were told. Auschwitz extermination camp, the ultimate example of deception. When the German trains pulled up to the Auschwitz killing facility, the Jewish passengers aboard the trains witnessed a reassuring sight as they rolled into the station. The entire area looked wonderful. Just listen to this. The houses of the crematorium had brick houses, windows, curtains, white picket fences around the front even. The people couldn't believe it. They were getting off the train. There was this touch of, well, safety, satisfaction even. But it was a diabolic genius that led them to their death. Exact opposite of what the people believed again. Remember, the reality lays in the exact opposite direction of what you're being told. So if they're saying peace, look out. Hide your head. During the time of the ruthless communist dictatorship in Russia, the smart people collectively came to the conclusion that they could not believe a word or any part of the mass media, since censors controlled every sentence of every article. Over time, the knowledgeable Russian came to the conclusion that the truth of every issue actually lay in the exact opposite of what they were being told. When the time arrived for the deliberate dissolution of the USSR, the people discovered that America was not the mortal enemy after all of the Russian people, as they had been told for decades, but the smart Russian already knew this fact because he had assumed the exact opposite of what the mass media in Russia was telling him. Again, the reality lays in the opposite direction of what you're being told. The New World Order plan to produce the Antichrist likewise makes a lot of use of this propaganda technique. And the events swirling around us right now, we could never hope to comprehend the truth unless we see this strategic outlook that the Illuminati-controlled mass media has given us as the exact opposite direction of what we're being told is where we're actually going. In other words, I know they got Facebook, and then Trump jumped on it. The two words, fake news. That's what's really going to be the censor now. Because there are now censors being in place online to weed out the fake news. So, they'll be weeding out guys like me. I'm fake news. Telling you to believe the opposite of what you're being told. Remember when George W. Bush said, "We're not at war against Islam"? The truth is that the Illuminati understood no later than the end of World War II that Islam was so strongly monotheistic that its followers could never and would never accept the claims of the New Age Christ. Therefore, they decided that all Muslim adherents gotta go, as well as the Christians, and they will be the two religions, along with Judaism, that will be banned as having been the cause of all the wars in the world. And they say that they're going to build a Palestinian state. Well, yes, they will, but it will be annihilated. Remember, when a leader is planning war, he speaks peace just before he launches the attack. It always happens that way. Stories began to appear at around 2001 that America was reversing its policy towards Israel and tilting toward Arab states. You can see it farther down the line now. It's opposite the Illuminati plan to produce the Antichrist and to build this temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The New World Order author Peter Lesmerier stated repeatedly that the New Age Christ would appear east of Jerusalem, enacting the fulfillment of Zechariah 9:9. And the last one-third of Lesmerier's book is devoted to the plan to deceive the Jewish people into thinking that this coming Antichrist is their Messiah. He speaks about the plan of the planned war to produce this New Age Christ and foresees all Israeli victory. What's more, Western illuminated Freemasonry is totally behind the effort to produce the Antichrist. Their most important ritual is the reenactment of the legend of Hiram Abiff, in which 3 ruffians conspire to assault and to kill Hiram Abiff, King Solomon's chief architect of the temple. Freemasons fully intend to rebuild that Jewish temple on the Temple Mount in order to deceive the Jews into believing that their Christ is the long-awaited Jewish Messiah. Obviously, this cherished plan will fall apart should Israel be defeated by the Arabs, which would hand permanent control over the Temple Mount to the Muslims. Such a development would be considered an absolute disaster to the Illuminati, and they will prevent it at all costs from happening. Since these statements make no sense, you must seek the truth in the exact opposite direction. Oh, mark my words, the Illuminati will hold out the possibility that a short peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians will allow the Illuminati to carry out their plan. One step is the creation of an internationalized zone in Jerusalem that allowed the creation of the International House of Prayer to be started. Then the Pope will announce that all religions of the world are now one, and he's their head. Yes, there's another reason also why the people will close their eyes. Because we'll keep promising them to give back all the liberties that they've taken away from us as soon as we quell the enemies of peace, and we tame all the renegade parties. Then we'll all get our freedoms back. Right. It's not worthwhile saying anything about the long time they will be kept waiting for this return of their freedoms. Really. They invented this whole policy. They state that they shall promise the people their liberties, give their freedoms back as soon as they've quelled the enemies of peace. Now, these Illuminati leaders, the liberties would be taken away using the ruse of war, using the ruse of disturbance, terrorist attacks. The simple answer is the illuminated ones have planned from the very beginning to first create the disaster and then step in with the solution that will enable them to become the dictators over the populace of the entire world. You know, Hitler found more than a political regime, because it's just like the coming New World Order. The Third Reich was an occult-based movement using magical and esoteric practices, as will be this coming one. As you can tell by all of the witchcraft and all the sorcery that's shown for public television and public consumption by young children, even indoctrinating them today into what's soon to take place. This has been A View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. Coast to Coast is next. I'm Space, and I'm out.